What is up, Raider Nation? The Silver and Black Attack is back. We have returned after our hiatus. I'm sure our subscribers, our loyal subs out there have a lot of questions as to where we were. And the truth is, there's a lot of factors. Me and Rashawn got really busy. Rashawn starting his professional career, and me, going into some of the upper division classes in college. Our schedules got tough, and at the same time, the Raiders got way worse. The franchise, there wasn't really much to talk about for basically the entirety of last season, and we'll get into this more, but with kind of the mess that was Antonio Pierce and Gardner Minshew, that experiment obviously did not work, and it wasn't really worth it for us to put out content that you guys are not going to want to watch because who wants to watch content about that? It's not really worth it. And now, with the new regime in place, we're going to mention Pete Carroll, John Spytek era has begun. We've made some moves in the offseason, and we're really excited, heading into the draft to kind of address the new chapter of Raider Nation.
Yeah, man, you said it. We're really glad to be back. I think, the last few months have been tough, not only in the world of the NFL, for the Raiders and also in our personal lives. I feel like, so much has happened over the last 6+ months. I started a new career, relocated, moved cities. Um, and that, has been difficult. I think that also was difficult starting your careers. I don't think it's ever easy for anyone. And then obviously for you going, into the little deeper into college and gets busy, you were just complaining about your 6 hours of lecture, which I don't miss at all for the record. Being a graduate from the University of Southern California. So fight on for that one. Um, but yeah, I think, you know, today we really want to go into what's happened over the last 6 months, and the Raiders have really, really, really reshaped, I mean, pretty much everything, from firing AP and Tom Telesco, which was the right move, by the way, to obviously letting Brady call more of the shots, hiring the stooge pawn GM in John Spytek, and bringing in a legendary head coach in Pete Carroll. I think, that's something that's really going to take an effect on this franchise. So I'll let you dive into Pete Carroll a little bit. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think Pete, obviously you know him well. You followed USC football your entire life. So what I'll say about Pete is it was the right hire. Like when we were going through the head coaching process, I was someone who really wanted Ben Johnson, and those reports were out there, but in hindsight, there was never really a chance we were going to get Ben. His agent put out those reports to Vinny Bonsignore and Hondo and our shameful beat reporters who always get it wrong. So the Ben Johnson thing didn't work out, obviously, but I think that was plan A, and then plan B was Pete Carroll, Super Bowl winning coach. And in our division, in the division with Peyton, Harbaugh, and Reed, you have to have a guy you can compete with, right? Pierce was obviously not that. He's not a competent head coach. Whereas Pete Carroll, you can go toe to toe with any of these teams in our division, in our conference, and it brings some legitimacy back to your organization, right? You're not the shit show organization anymore. You have someone who's a program builder, builds a culture, can develop players, and put a scheme in place to where you can be competent. I think that's what Pete Carroll brings. Obviously, the one thing he's a little older. Me and you have our little jokes with the him in the wheelchair whenever we're not making any moves in the offseason. I think that's not the best thing, right? His age, but look, the Raiders fire head coaches every 2, 3 years anyway. And so I think Pete, he's not intended to be the coach for 10 years. I think he's Brady and Mark want him in to establish a culture, right? And that only takes 2 to 3 years. We'll get someone else in at the helm kind of to carry on that legacy. But Pete Carroll, I think the big word is culture that he's going to bring.
Yeah, the culture he brings is obviously we've seen it before. We saw it at USC, we saw it in Seattle, and then obviously he took a year off, went to the front office for a year, and wanted to get back into coaching. And he said it in his introductory press conference. He said he was dying to get back out there. And if I'm not mistaken, he's going to be 74 years old this year. I mean, you got to really love the game to want to come back at that age and do it all over again. All the travel, all the practices, all the OTAs, training camp, off-season work. You just got to love football to do that. And I think, like you mentioned in our division, we have coaches in there, Sean Payton, Andy Reid, Jim Harbaugh, guys that just love football. They love and live and breathe football. And unfortunately, Antonio Pierce was a former player, Super Bowl winner. But when you look at him, you can't really say that he, lived and breathed football. I mean, at the end of the day, you got to be some sort of competent to be an NFL head coach. And as we saw at the end of last season, winning those two games over the Saints and the Jaguars, I believe, I mean, just completely tanked our draft position for no reason. I mean, we were in poised position to get the number one pick, take Cam Ward, and we were going to be fine. But now is another big question mark. Roll in Mr. Geno Smith. We traded our other third round pick for Geno. Reunite him with Pete Carroll. And now we're going to see what's going to happen. I mean, Geno Smith highlights from last year, he balled out. I'm not going to lie to you. I watch his highlights at work probably like a couple times a week, like the full 25-minute 2024 tape. I watch a couple times a week because he balled out last year. And back in 22, he balled out. We saw when the Raiders played Seattle in 22 and we beat them in overtime with that Jacobs run from the 50-yard line. Geno Smith is a baller. I mean, 2023, he was a little down. He threw a lot of interceptions, but he's a baller. And he's going to bring a competitive edge to the Raiders that we haven't had at the quarterback position since, I'd say Derek Carr in 2021 was the last time. Long hair Derek Carr. That was the last time we had anything competitive at the quarterback position.
Yeah, what I'd say about Gino, I think I was talking to my dad about this when we signed him. I think his essentially his comp is going to be Jason Campbell. Like the hardcore Raider fans, the diehard Raider fans remember the Jason Campbell days, and I think that's exactly what he's going to be. I don't think you can win a Super Bowl with Geno Smith. I'll die on that hill. I know a lot of people are really excited about it, and I'm excited about it too. At least we have someone when you turn on the TV, you can be excited to watch Raider football again, and that's someone we have, right? I think he gives you a chance to win 8, 9, 10 games, compete for a wild card spot. And that's something we haven't had, like you said, since that 2021 season with Derek Carr. And so I think, it's tough. As a Raider fan, you can't, the last few years, when you turn on the TV, you're expecting a loss. It's hard to watch some of these games as fans. I don't think we're going to see that next season with that combination of Carroll and Geno. Like it just brings you competency, like we've been saying. It's not, I wouldn't say it's a home run move to get Geno Smith. We wanted Matthew Stafford, obviously. Couldn't get that done. Obviously, Cam Ward is someone we're both really high on in the draft. We're not going to be able to get him, obviously, with the number 6 pick. But I think Geno, he's solid. I think based on the circumstances that Spytech and Carroll were given, I think it's a good move. It's the best we probably could have done this offseason.
Yeah, and like you said, the Jason Campbell, all the real diehard Raider fans know the pain that happened back in 2011, I believe. Jason Campbell was kicking ass in the NFL. And there was a game against Cleveland. I think it was week 6. And the Raiders were 4-2. And Jason Campbell broke his collarbone against the Browns in the Coliseum. I'll never forget that. Broke his collarbone and he was out for the year. And then they went a few games, I believe, with Kyle Bowler, who was a Boise State product, on the cover of NCAA. And then at one point, I think Mark Davis just, called a shot and Raiders traded for Carson Palmer. I don't know if you remember that. They traded for Carson Palmer from Cincinnati, and Carson Palmer's first game at the Coliseum, the first game, like he had just been traded 3 days before, comes out and the Chiefs blank us at home 24-0. And I think that was week 8 or week 9. And after that, it was downhill. I think they had scraped out like 2 out of 4 in the last 6, and they finished 8-8 for the second year in a row. And after that, Hugh Jackson was fired. They brought in Dennis Allen, and then we know the rest is history. Carr was drafted, Mack was drafted. The rest is history in 2014. So, I mean, I see what you're saying with that comp, but I think the one thing Geno Smith has done is proven that he can make a playoff run. And even last year they won 9 games and they or 10 games. They were 10-7 and they missed the playoffs. So he really has shown, I think, just by looking at his tape, that he can make the hard throws. He can make moves out of the pocket. And he has wheels still. He can still run. He ran a 4.5 40-yard dash and he can still run.
Yeah. I think Yeah, Geno Smith is going to be solid. Like I think we're both. It's a positive move for the organization. It's a step we needed to take. Another thing I kind of wanted to hit on is John Spytek and some of the moves that we've made, kind of regarding the defensive side of the ball or lack thereof. Right. I think me and you are really high on the Devin White and the Landon Roberts signings. I think losing Spillane's obviously not ideal. He was a good player. Losing Diablo, I mean, Diablo's a little worse, but you're losing two starting linebackers. That's never easy. So I think they did a good job of getting cheaper kind of alternatives to those players who have proven, like Devin White, number 5 pick in the draft. I remember I wanted to draft him back when we drafted Cleve Farrell, and he had kind of a generational run in that Super Bowl run for the Bucks. He was an All-Pro linebacker, and so you're getting a guy who has that playoff pedigree. Landon Roberts from played for the Steelers. Like we've had that happen with Spillane before, and he worked out. So you're getting guys with pedigree at the linebacker position. I would say kind of something that I was a little bit upset with is kind of the secondary and how that's formed. Um, Losing Merrick is not ideal. Epps, you're going to let go off the torn ACL. Nate Hobbs is going to be gone. And so I think we're really thin at corner. And I think we're not ideal at safety. We signed Jeremy Chin, but I'm not that high on Chin. Kind of the rap sheet on him is he's a hard-hitting safety. And that's usually code for the guy can't cover. So Trayvon, I think, is a better cover player than Chin. And so we're gonna see. I think the secondary isn't got worse. I think the linebackers could stayed stagnant, and then the D line we have everyone returning. So I think the defense is going to be a little worse, which is not ideal in Spytek's first season.
Yeah, and the Hobbs loss is probably the biggest loss on the defense. I think losing Nate Hobbs really just means losing your nickel cornerback. And obviously he played injured most of the time. And I can see the comments coming now that Nate Hobbs is always hurt. I've gotten a few Instagram comment wars with people like who argue that Hobbs going is good and he's always playing hurt half the time. And I mean, all those things are true, but he got the job done when he needed to. In the corner room, we're really thin. I think Jack Bennett has probably got one of the sides, but Jack Jones really struggled last year. Towards the end of it, I think Jack Jones really struggled, and they're going to be looking to replace him in the draft. Is my guess. I think if they keep Jack Jones, he'll be a lower depth chart corner. And talking about the number 6 pick, I think what you really could do here, if you're not going to take Aston Genty, which is the real like no brainer move here. Spytek's son even said it that he'll leave if his dad does a bad job and doesn't take Ashton Genty. But if you don't get Genty, you might want to think about trading down and maybe trying to get a cornerback at either 10, 12, or 13 around there. I think the guy from Michigan, Will Johnson, will be there at 11, 12, or 13 around there. So if a team's looking to trade up for someone that's caught their eye, I think that could be something to look out for. I know there's been rumbles about maybe trading back in the draft, but the one thing about Ashton Genty is that if you don't take him at 6, there's no shortage of running back talent in this draft. So if you don't take Ashton Genty at 6, there's no shortage of running back talent in this draft. You got Trayvon Henderson from Ohio State, Quinshon Judkins from Ohio State, Cam Scatterable from Arizona State, just 3 guys who really shook the NCAA this past season, and you can easily get them in the second or third round. I think all 3 of those guys will be available with our second pick and then with our third pick that we have. So if you pass on Genty, you trade down. It's a no-brainer. But I think Genty is one of the best running back prospects we've seen in a really long time.
Yeah, for sure. I think Ashton Genty so far, the consensus pick on all the mock drafts has been Genty, and so. And look, we're gonna have mock drafts coming out. We're gonna have our first round projections, what the Raiders should do, trade down scenarios, all that stuff coming soon. This is the time we really popped off last year, and grew our following to where it is. And so draft season's always been kind to us on this channel. And yeah, Raider Nation, we're back. We're excited to be back. We're glad to be back. I hope you guys are happy to get this content again. And yeah, we're looking forward to seeing your guys' comments back in the action. And yeah, Raider Nation, appreciate it. We'll catch you guys soon.